Good day and welcome to For the Greater Good. I'm Roger Sant as we talk about the upcoming general elections in Trinidad and Tobago scheduled for April 28th. Now, it was just about 5 years ago, Monday, August 10th, 2020, that Trinidad and Tobago went to the polls to elect 41 members of Parliament. The PNM, under the leadership of Dr. Keith Rowley, won 22 seats, and the United National Congress, under Kamla Persad-Bissessar, won 19 seats. Today, Dr. Rowley remains the political leader of the PNM, but Stuart Young, who was named the successor as Prime Minister and approved by the sitting PNM MPs in Parliament, is leading the People's National Movement into the April 28th general election, which PM Young called shortly after being sworn in as Prime Minister. The election has traditionally been a two-party race in Trinidad and Tobago, a fight between the PNM and the UNC. The PNM has kept most of its lineup, with Dr. Rowley having bowed out of politics. On the UNC side, there are many new faces and coming together once again with the labor movement. As we head to the election on April 28, we want to talk about a number of issues which often arise on the platform: the rhetoric, promises of campaign reform, campaign financing, and other issues that were made during the last election campaign as they affect the average citizen in Trinidad and Tobago. So as we kick off campaign 2025, we have as our guests on our program today Roman Catholic Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon, seated closest to me on the far right of the table; Seventh-day Adventist Pastor Clive Dottin; Ralph Peter of the Santathan Dharma, Maha, Sabha; and Leela Ramdeen from the Council of Ethical Political Conduct, So thank you very much all for joining us. And as we go into the campaign, into the election, which is just about 4 weeks away, April 28th, a month of campaigning left. As religious leaders, what's your take on the state of Trinidad and Tobago in 2025? Pastor Dottin, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm coming here in a negative mood, I must tell you, because of the Mayoral constituency. I want to be very frank and honest about that. But you know what I get from what is taking place?
And you're referring to the fact that the incumbent MP was not selected as the candidate for 2025 based on how the party saw it?
I feel broken and bruised by that. And I'm saying that because I think a lot of people in his group constituency would feel that way. But I feel a special sense of pain in terms of that. And it brings me to the point that sometimes political leaders do not believe that we go through that process as citizens. They feel we made out of iron, and we have absolutely no feelings. And it brings me to this point of constitution reform. I believe what the Constitution Advisory Committee recommended. It recommended about 4 things. But the first one was fixed dates for elections. I think power is a beast, And absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I believe when you have, room to take advantage, you take advantage. It's the carnal deity at play here, if I should use a theological term, So I came here this morning feeling bruised and battered, I must tell you.
Okay, your opening remarks. Mr. Peter from the STMS?
Yes, well, at the STMS, we look at the campaigning strategies that the parties use, and many of which are a bit concerning in the sense that some of the statements and some of the allegations that are being made and put across, it is a little bit alarming in terms of what is expected on the outside and how persons purport to do certain things. It also gives the impression that the younger ones especially would be privy to these things, and it questions where we are heading. So it is a bit concerning in terms of these statements. And there were instances as well where statements would have been made on the platform where at one point the TV station would have been warned about broadcasting these things. So these are some of the things that worry us.
Warned by, is it Telecommunications Authority?
Yes, Telecommunications Authority.
Right. And we'll get back to that in a bit as we move around. Leela?
Well, not as a religious leader, but being on the council and being a consultant with the Catholic Commission for Social Justice, one of my main concerns is how do we change the culture? How do we improve the discourse during an election, any election, local or national? Because it's the nature of the discourse that's so bruising to our nation and to our people. And the fact that because our leaders are not improving that discourse, then those who are looking on, not only the children, but the citizenry in particular, they take their lead from the leaders. And so, our concern as citizens must be to improve that discourse, to strengthen our democracy. Democracy, the underpinning values that we know that we all really strive for, but unless the leaders take the lead, as somebody said recently, this election is not about any of the issues about crime and the environment and economy, etc. It's about leadership. And I truly believe we need leaders who would take the bull by the horn and say, enough of that. Let's try to build a stronger democracy based on fairness and justice. Justice, really, as we know, is about right relationships in the Catholic Church. It's about a just ordering of society. We won't have that if we have leaders who allow all this bacchanal and mudslinging, and character assassination to go on. Sorry, I carried on too much.
No problem. Your Grace, your take?
The election is a reflection of us, every citizen. And that saddens me. I think we are much, much better than this. Right. If citizens refuse to vote for people who refuse to hold high standards, I think the politicians will change very quickly. They're doing what they're doing because they believe that's how they get their vote. And I think it's a very poor reflection on us as a society, on the one hand. But what Leela said is also true. The leader leads the citizenry in the direction also. And therefore, not only are we pandering to the lowest common denominator, but we are being led down that road too often on the election trail and too often in the political arena. We are a young democracy, but we have things in our nation that many other countries don't have. We are really small as a nation, and we have such diversity that we should learn how to do this better. And we really have to learn to do this better. So my heart is just a pain that we have of what we have become because of the political process.
So we get what we vote for, if I'm to summarize what you said.
But
we get what we vote for, but then our leaders also try to take us down a road that is not, and following up what Leela said, is not something that is wholesome.
Correct.
Let's, as we are into the campaign, it's a short campaign, I think minimum 6 weeks.
God.
Is the campaigning a divisive time in our country? I mean, we are in from a religious point of view, we're celebrating Eid, Spiritual Shorter Baptist Day, heading into Easter, all of that. The Hindus are also celebrating as well. And here we have a campaign superimposed over all of that, and probably will put some of those celebrations, religious celebrations, on the background. Is the campaign a divisive time in the country? Your Grace.
I think Trinidad and Tobago, in the level of the village, on the street corner, in the classroom, in the workplace, really is not a racial society, I mean, I sat down in class with people of all different walks of life and all different ethnicities and religions. In Fatima College, a guy who was a Muslim won the prize for religion in my year group. Right. Beat me.
Not you.
No, he beat me. He beat me. He won the prize for religion. But what makes us racial is every time the politicians have not found another way to attract the vote of their constituents, and so race has become how they attract the vote. And so we have this 5-year thing of racism, and then a recovery period after that. And I think that's just not right. And it talks to an immature democracy, because we're not talking about ideas and we're not talking about issues.
Right.
What we're talking about is really, how can I attract my people to vote for me? That's a problem.
Right. As David Rudder said, Leela, how we vote is not how we
how we
party.
party.
Yes, that was going through my mind, yes. And I mean, the sad thing, I was reading Rafiq Shah this morning, and he was actually, we have to face the fact that, thank God, as he said, we're not like many other countries where it turns into violence. My father was an MP in 61, 66, our first independent parliament. And in those days, the bull pistol, oh my God, the violence in our elections, terrible in those days. So we have come a long way. So while there are negative things, let's thank God that we didn't continue to go down that road. My mother, every 2 elections that my father was involved with, was on her knees with her children. So we Rafiq Shah, we have come a long way. Yeah. Let's continue to urge our leaders, to urge the citizenry, to think about how we build a just society and right relationships.
Mr. Peter?
Yes, well, at the end of the election, we have to live together. We have to survive, we have to coexist. And it is important that, we identify with one another. Like Archbishop said, we have all races work together. In our schools, we have all different ethnicities in the school. As a matter of fact, some years ago in the Balficas competition that we had, in the Hindi component, we had a child of African origin that won the Hindi competition. And it is,
Trinidad.
Yes, and this is something that we have to embrace. And the period that we're in now, as you mentioned, with Eid and Lent and Navratri and all these things, maybe it is a good thing, because now we would focus a lot on our religious aspect, and we would let that guide us as well in terms of how we move forward.
Pastor Dottin.
I had 2 conversations on the issue of Stuart Young and Julian John before they were appointed. Let's deal with Julian John first, because you mentioned about the primary religious, composition of the both parties. So Julian John is Afro-Trinidadian. Pretty well off, I understand. All right? It seems as if the business class has gravitated towards her because she ran significant business on behalf of another group. So somebody came to me, and I think what happens in Trinidad, we underestimate the power of one. We must be the change we want to see. So we could talk all this here and then go on the ground, and move people in the wrong direction. So we have to be careful with that. So the person was telling me, Julian John could never be leader of an Indian-dominated party. And I said, you must never say never. Because I think the conversation has to go in the direction of competencies. And then it came to Stuart Young. Well, there's an Afro-Indo thing. We can have a Chinese leader. I said, you're talking nonsense. And I am very bold and straightforward like you folks here. So I told them, no, if we refuse, and Arch made a statement there about the lack of maturity. So if we don't push the conversation, words are powerful things, and I think some people don't understand that. How I refer to a Catholic or Hindu or Muslim, I was telling you before that I don't believe only Christians would be in heaven. Now that's a heavy statement to wrap your mind around, I feel other folks, I've met people who are not Christians who have died, and they were fantastic people. I couldn't see God leaving them out of the number when the saints go marching home, So I just want to say that we have to help to change the conversation, whether it's in the church, in business, in NGOs. We have to help to shape the conversation to get the required effect.
So those are the opening statements on this program. We'll take a short break, and as we go to break, we want to hear what some of the rank and file members of the public have to say.
I want them to see about the youths and them, probably get more jobs for them and, help them, because a lot of them ending up on the street, plenty of them going to school, and yet still they're coming out with the passes and they can't get jobs, and, it's very hard for them. Some of them even, they're chipping off while, waiting for this positive job with the passes. And even so, if they don't have, they can't get jobs properly.
Okay, so I think crime is a major problem. Crime, the condition of the road, and I'll give you an example of what I see in my area where I live. I think since about 2017, WASA would have done some work. They dug up the road to, I think, reroute pipes or something like that, right? We're in 2025. That has not been repaired. They've also ticked a box by putting a fire hydrant at the corner of my house. And I think about 2 years ago, we had a fire on our street. And I proudly said, officer, we have a fire hydrant right here. And he said, that's cosmetic reason. That's just for cosmetic purposes. It doesn't even function.
Well, to me, most of all, is the road issue, and that we need to have a understand about helping the people in our country, because people are hurting, they are crying out for help, and there's no one helping us, because after you all do all the campaign, all finish campaigning, you all finish with us. So my heart is that people need help, and when you all say you all promise, please keep all the promise and be there for the people.
In time that when you take people and have them working for you, and you're bringing people to get the votes, you're supposed to have that person out. And that don't happen. People in this country right now, they can't pay the big rent, and rent is too high. 2,000 is a small place, this kind of thing. Build much more houses for poor people. And according to the groceries, people have a lot of children and on the privilege and wherever it is, and people don't have a certain kind of income for themselves to feed their family. They should see about those barriers.
And welcome back to The Greater Good. So some of the sentiments on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago, people talking about bread and butter issues, really, jobs, crime, roads, promises not being kept. And that takes us into the direction, Your Grace, of are the issues being dealt with, the bread and butter issues of people, and are they being addressed, whoever wins the election, whoever gets to form the government in the next few years and in the past, are the bread and butter issues being attended to?
That's $1 million question constantly, because at the end of the day, what comes to the platform are the sexy issues and not the substantive issues. Right. Most times. If you ask me, and I listened to those who said, and yes, they're right, crime is a major issue. But crime is not a problem of a particular person or a group of people. It is communities that have been left in underdevelopment for decades and decades. We have to find a way to move those communities from underdevelopment to development, so those communities are no longer considered hotspots. They're not hotspots, they're abandoned communities by us, this country. Education, 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 education. We could not allow the kind of rhetoric that we're allowing if we had an educated population. And I'm not talking about accreditation now. I'm talking about real education where the mind is opened up to think big, big thoughts. And digital, the whole digitization, the world is digital. We're still in a chalk and talk classroom. We have big issues that we need to deal with.
Leela?
Yes, thinking about the church's concept of integral human development, the development of each person and of every dimension of the person. Just listening to those citizens crying out for help made me, we all know then that we haven't got to that stage where we're concerned about the development of everyone, not just the few. Justice is giving each person what is his or her due. And we're not there yet. What basic things? I was a chief inspector of schools in England, and when I look at the education system, one of the things with the constitutional reform was that people were saying we need, and our presidents in the past, we need to reform our education system. Why, when we talk about crime, when I was too young, I read one of my father's book, Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath. And in that there's a sentence that resonates with me even today. When the rich are too rich and the poor are too poor, there are ways. So what His grace is saying, when you abandon communities, when you don't see their needs, or you go around only at election time, then we have to make sure that we realize why some of them are now coming for a slice of the cake.
But both your Grace and yourself, Leela, you've talked about communities being abandoned. We seem to have, however, a lot of social programs. We have a Ministry of Social Development that are supposed to be reaching out to those communities and helping people who are most in need. So is it what? The delivery is not happening and the impact is not there?
So is it social delivery or is it patronage?
Okay.
Suzanne Craig wrote a very important book back in the 70s and saying the British government never understood anything about development. And the local governments we have had have all been about patronage.
Yeah.
So as long as it's about patronage, we're not moving the country forward. It has to be about development of each child, every dimension of the child, and the family, and the community. I walk communities that are, I would call them abandoned communities.
And recently, the Eternal Light would have opened a school in Sealots to try and fill that gap, right?
That's why we went to Sealots,
right,
because of how abandoned it is.
Mr. Peter, you and the SDMS, you all have a huge school population.
Yes.
The topic of education came up. What are your views in terms of the education system?
Well, with the education system, if we have a fully functional educational system, I think the event of crime would be something that could be addressed. A lot of emphasis must be placed on education in terms of resources, in terms of support that schools could have. Recently, there would have been a lot of talk about the placement of teachers in school, right, and the ratio of students to teachers. And if schools are fully equipped with teachers, if the programs are there and the resources are there, then we could move forward. We would have come out of a situation where during COVID, we would have delved to a great extent in terms of virtual learning. And somehow we see now that that does not play a pivotal role in terms of what taking place, and we would have gone back basically to what we would have been. Yes. So it is where we need to progress from where we are and add value to our education system so that children would start to understand now responsibilities and their roles and values and these things so that it could transform into adulthood where we would eliminate things like crime and dishonesty and all the different social ills that we face at this time.
And where do you see that responsibility lying to make those changes?
Right. Well, it relies both on the community and on the government. And there must be some sort of collaboration in terms of what is taking place and feedback moving from the schools going all the way up to the top so that they could be guided as well in terms of what we do.
Pastor Dottin, I know you are also very passionate about education and the fact that we need to take the level up in terms of education in Trinidad and Tobago. Your views on that and some of these bread and butter issues that the people talked about?
I would say when it comes to education reform, we give lip service to it. You know, before I even go there, before I forget, I listened to Felicia Thomas last night, the PSA leader, newly minted leader, who was gone on the UNC platform. Well, I suppose that's her right. That's how she was chosen, you know, as her first initiative, remove the government. But you know what I listened to, you know, Roger and the rest of us here? The amount of things she said she was promised, I don't see that being realized for a good while. So that she's on the platform, she says they've been working for a couple of years on this agenda, how they would treat with trade unions, nothing below 10%, for example, and a lot of other issues there. And I'm saying, I wonder if there'll be a fallout if she doesn't get half of those things within the 5-year period. I just wonder a lot. The other thing is, each religion has great people and people who not, have a broad worldview. Like I was in, now I have a love for serve all that will compete with any Catholic's love for serve all, you know. I will go to my grave saying that. I am 75, by the way. I will go to my grave saying that. So one day I was in a national instructors meeting and Somebody whispered to me in hierarchy, remember this Assemblies thing? I said, it's a Catholic thing. So I told them, I said, it was never an issue for me. You know what I mean? And Serval group still call me. I've been working with Serval voluntarily for like 35 years, going and lecture to young people and that kind of stuff. In terms of crime and drugs, I think what we want to do is only handle blue-collar crime. I don't think we have the courage to handle white-collar crime. You know, C.S. Lewis says, you know, humanity must be involved in sabotaging evil. But the reverse happens, that evil sabotages us. That's what C.S. Lewis said. So I believe we have got to lift our level of thinking in terms of, you know, where we want to engage the society. And I come back to my last point in my first discussion here. We must be the change we want to see in the politicians. So we as pastors, the church, you know, we must set the right example, but sometimes even among the church, there's so much nepotism. So we don't have the courage, the passion to talk to the politicians because we're guilty ourselves.
So do you think that maybe church leaders cower to the politicians?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe
when
so.
When it comes to these types
you know, I've told my pastors in the seminary, you cannot be praying for one party alone to win at election time. That is unacceptable. That's like the unpardonable sin. Pray for everybody. You can't just pray for the prime minister or pray for the leader of the opposition. Pray for everybody. You know, all of us have to become more inclusive. I have said, if I became National Security Minister, Serval will drive my first initiative, you know. I have said that all over the world. Serval. All right, I'm not saying this to flatter the brethren who are here, you know, His Grace and Day, but I mean that passionately, you know.
Okay, we'll take another short break, and we want to hear again from the people what are some of the issues that they are concerned about as we are in this general election 2025 campaign.
So 5 national issues that should be dealt with on the platform to me. Number 1 being, you know, national security, the crime situation. Number 2, I would say the healthcare system. I would say community development, employment, yeah, just education, yeah.
I think that homeless people should have a shelter once again after they close down the one in Port of Spain. I also think that sanitary workers need to work a bit harder because this country is a bit disgusting, especially the main city, Port of Spain, and also the unemployment rates needs to go down. Probably open up some more jobs like in CPEP or WASA or something like that, and also the crime situation needs to go down. Probably patrolling the shores more often with the Coast Guard could help with the importation of drugs and guns.
Number 1, crime, right? And housing. I think we wait in like 10, 20 years just to get an apartment. That's not right. We should just shut down HDC. 3, more for the old folks. I think they should care more for the old people because all of us are getting old and there's no programs for the old folks to get. And a lot of them think the pension is still too small. 4, more love in the country. There's no more love here. And everybody's all bending and screwing. Nobody can't tell you good morning or anything like that anymore. And 5, I wish the youths could change their lifestyle around and stop all this stripness with this gang thing, because when you die, there's no coming back, and I think it's just a game they're playing, and it doesn't make any sense. And I hope Trinidad change, and it's a beautiful country, Trinidad and Tobago, and I love my country. Thank you.
So again, the views of the population, and we certainly love Trinidad and Tobago. It's such a beautiful place when we look at the different ethnicities, the cultures, the fact that we have all these religious celebrations taking place. As Nelson Mandela said many years ago when he visited TNT, a rainbow country, and it's something that we can be a sign for the rest of the world in how to live in a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. But some of the issues, again, coming up, and crime, education, housing, community development, this love for each other, as the last gentleman said, that has eroded. how can, you all talked about it a little earlier, education being one of the solutions to crime. There's also a view that as the economy has shrunk over the last few years, that has also fueled the crime. What can whoever forms in the government, what can our politicians, our leaders do that probably hasn't been done to help solve the crime issue? Leela?
You know, the one word that came out from all those who gave their priorities was love. You know, I think all religions that I know have love. Love your neighbor, love God, neighbor, self, and environment. Those are the things that, and if our leaders had love for themselves and their neighbor, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. When homelessness, remember the time when they were hosing down the homeless to clean up the city because something was going on? We have too many homeless. One gentleman talked about this, no facilities for the elderly. The elderly, we're abandoning the elderly. So many of them. I've been involved as a lawyer with a lot of cases where children are trying to put their parents in homes so they can take their property.
All right.
So those are just 3 or 4 things that came out there that would help if our leaders only think strategically and think. All of them, I think, belong to one or other religion. Yeah, all our leaders. Time to act.
I want to jump in here. I have made a clarion call for support groups to deal with different issues. I adopted a young man. We have adopted the whole family now, a group of us. And they don't belong to our church. The guy was shot and killed 2 years ago.
Wow.
Through his right eye. I was completely devastated. He was part of the, but you know you don't have Rasta and ISIS again, you have 6 and 7. So he was accused. So we had him in a safe space. That became problematic. But his sister has had 2 children in quick time. I adopted the first child. My group COP, I have a group called Courage Unlimited, please. Because I see lack of courage as a major issue in this society. So we took them on, and then bam, our next child comes. So I had to tell them, I said, let me tell you something. The 3rd child, I'm out, unless you all get married, because you're not married. And there's apparently a significant level of abuse. Never forget, I heard Sat Maharaj made that point one day. We had a meeting, and he was saying, what we all know, society is judged by how you treat the eldest and how you treat the youngest. Even with dealing with abuse of children, we have protected abusers. 2 members of my church were shot and killed 2 years ago. And the guy who killed them is a protected assassin. And I say that with authority. So that, to my mind, Mandela's statement about courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to manage that fear is where we have reached. Because I think we know what to do. The Teaching Service Commission has a lot of work to do. We have to decide on service commissions. Dr. Rowley made a lot of statements on that. We have to decide. Yes. Do we want them, or is politics stymieing them, paralyzing them? For one, I believe that no prime minister must have the kind of power that prime ministers have now over the selection of a police commissioner. Because actually how the system is not law that he determines, but he determines how we practice Westminster brand. And I think that is a low-hanging fruit that we have got to fix in terms of crime. Because it means I feel obligated to the Prime Minister. I'm a human being. The fellows who become commissioners of police become. And I look at the issue of what young people think about us, how we go in as a society. They must think poorly of us. Because, I mean, when I was on the Police Service Commission, I fought Mr. Manning. But one thing about him, I will tell you, he could fight you today and tell you good morning tomorrow. Right. I have met prime ministers in the country, fight them today, they pass you straight the next day. So the question of attitude towards reform, not just education reform, but that includes the teaching service, the reform of our institutions. By the way, let me tell you something. When corruption hits the institutions, the next step is anarchy. And Trinidad and Tobago, I warn the population, is facing anarchy.
Your Grace, you talked about education as one of the solutions to help with the crime issue? What else do you think can be done?
I think we have to accept one fact, that there is an economy in this country that has nothing to do with the legitimate businesses.
Right.
And until we accept that that is so, and that the underground economy is where the guns and the drugs and the human trafficking is happening, then we have to also accept the fact that that economy has become so big, they've become really good at corrupting every office holder. Until you understand that, you can't move corruption and crime out of the equation. We have some courage to happen here to be able to do Al Capone style and start putting in jail people who have white collars, who are part of this underground economy. The guys, I was in a community for 5 years. I worked with the biggest gang leaders in Port of Spain. Not one of them could have moved money and product from Colombia to Trinidad, back to the States and back through the Caribbean, and collect the money.
Exactly.
And pay the debt.
Right.
They could not do it. I spoke with them. They didn't have that capacity. That capacity comes at another level of society. And we're not willing to touch that. We're not willing to speak about it. We're not willing to deal with it. And until we're willing to deal with that, not only the office holders corrupted, but the youth are being corrupted by it.
Let me jump in here for a second. I'm not timing him. I won't talk for the rest of the time. But listen.
A wine of the pastor.
Yes, I mean,
A wine of pastor now.
you're coming in my space there. The IADB says that 1/3 of our gross domestic product comes from the underground.
1/3.
That's $60 billion, 1/3,
Right.
which is more than your national budget. I feel it's more closer to 40%.
It's more than that.
You're right? Because they're dealing with official figures, but you're underground, giving you the official figures. So that I believe our present bunch of politicians believe they could do nothing. And the society takes its lead from the leaders.
Yes.
That we could do nothing to stop that.
You have
and
to stop it.
I challenge that. We have to stop it.
Have to stop
if we have
it.
to move on.
Otherwise, we'll have no society tomorrow.
At all.
And that's where the courage comes in. Somebody needs to
Exactly.
step up
Yes.
and
Exactly.
say they would like to step in there.
Who will build the cat?
Right.
Well, I believe that it is a very difficult situation for persons at this stage to step up, and because of fear of, speaking out. I appreciate your, you're being so very vocal about it. But we have to face the situation where these things happen, and a lot of persons scared to come out and say anything. I would want to digress a little bit in the sense that I remember the gentleman before mentioning things about values and love, like Leland would have mentioned.
Sure.
And we no longer have where you would have a little child would come up to you and call out and say good morning,
Yes.
or how you doing. And
But those things are taught and reinforced in schools.
Yes.
So what happens? Where does it disappear?
I would say that to a great extent, parenting has a lot to do with it.
Yes.
Because it is not reinforced at home.
Right.
So you have it at school. Right? I would have seen where children come and they meet and greet you, and they don't do that with their parents. So it is something that we have to start and inculcate from early o'clock and get them to start doing it. Long ago, you couldn't walk in your neighborhood and pass the neighbor's street because the neighbor would tell the parent, and then you would get disciplined for it.
Yeah.
Now you could pass and not call out to anybody, and
The
you could
village
disrespect
is
them.
not raising the child
Yes.
anymore.
Longer.
And this is one of the fundamental problems, and it starts from early o'clock. And if we don't start fixing it early o'clock, then it's going to
agree.
escalate to the extent that we face now. So in addressing where we are now, we need to address where we start in, so that at least we could have a shift in the system as we go along.
Yes.
Because it is very difficult to change at the top so much, but we could start to work from the bottom and start to filter it out.
Can I say that it has to be a multifaceted approach?
Yep.
It
Sure,
has to be
sure,
top down
sure,
and bottom up.
sure.
Right.
We
Yes.
can't do one without the other.
Yep.
When we look at Pastor Dottin and I on a committee called to Action for Social Change Foundation, and we did an ABC of parenting, we have to educate our parents, but also in schools we need civic education.
Yes.
the curriculum really has to embrace that.
Amen.
How do we...
And values
And
education.
values, how do we inculcate in our youngsters the kind of values that will enable them to say, no, I don't want to gun. No, I'm going down a different road. It has to be at home, at school, in the community. I'm looking at the opening of a community center, 58 new community centers in Trinidad and Tobago. What kind of programs go on there? Who has access to rent the space there?
Right.
Community centers can do a lot for communities.
Absolutely.
So it's not as if we don't have some of the infrastructure.
Right.
It's how we use them. So let's do better by our people.
Let me just to stick a pin here in the sense that I don't know what it is with Catholic schools, but government schools, and certainly our Sabha Estate Primary School, that has 600 students. You hardly have male teachers. That gender imbalance is part of our challenge.
That's a problem.
Gender imbalance is part of our challenge. And we have to address
When
that.
it comes to teaching, the shift has happened in the last few years where we have a majority female teachers.
Yes.
And many of our schools now don't have, are lacking teachers because they cannot yet be appointed.
Yeah.
50 teachers in our schools, 50 principals are acting, and I could go on and on.
Well, it's great. I go to schools
could go on
regularly,
and on.
and I could tell you, I have noted that the last 6 secondary schools I've gone to, including Rio Claro East last week for the career day, he's acting. It's a Hollywood thing we have here.
Yeah.
Listen, best acting performer,
Oh my goodness.
Oscar Awards.
Yes, yes.
We'll take another break and return. When we come back, we want to talk about the Council for Ethical Political Conduct and their role in elections in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll be right back.
No, I will say no. It wouldn't have a clean campaign. It will have some little. I'm trying to get the word, but the campaign wouldn't be clean at all. It's an election, and all kind of things that's going when people campaigning and election time.
No, I don't, because as someone that takes my perspective from the scriptures, and the Bible tells us in this time that we are living in, that evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. Also, the Bible tells us in Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 9 that the heart of man is evil and desperate above all things, right? So I don't think that, even though it's our system of government, but the heart of man needs to look to Jesus Christ for the answer.
In Trinidad, I don't think that it's possible that I could trust that it would be clean and respectful, because they always throw slurs at one another, and
So talking about a clean campaign, and we are in the midst of the general election campaign. And Leela, let me go to you. We have a Council of Ethical Political Conduct that was formed under Archbishop Harris more than a decade ago. But I see you're getting some pushback, at least from a couple of the political parties. So how is the council going to perform, and what is the role of the council in a general election in TNT?
Right. First, it's important that citizens know the origins. This is not just 8 people pick up themselves or 9 people and say we're going to implement this code. In 2014, in June 2014, Archbishop Harris got together a group of people from civil society. So it was publishers and broadcasters, Transparency Institute, the IRO, the major religions, Catholic, Presbyterian, Hindu, Muslim, and they came together, a network of NGOs, and they decided that we really need something to shift the discourse and shift the culture in our politics. And so they created a code of ethical political conduct. But this code needed to be monitored by somebody. Right. And so a group of, and in those days there were 9 people, plus they appointed 5 members from the different political parties that had signed on: PNM, UNC, ILP, COP, and MSJ. But what happened is that when other parties started coming into being, they say, well, hang on, how only those 5 on there? So in 2019, so the code was launched officially in March 2015. Then in 2019, there was a revision of the code. So we took away all the political parties, there were 5, and we created a code keeper group where the political parties could put their representatives, which didn't work. So there are 8 people, 9 people on the committee. We have a vacancy at the moment. There are 9 people on the council. And our task, we have revised the code because we had taken out the political parties there. So the code in 2019 was revised, and the media have been really good. They've been, each time, I think there are about 8 elections. Our task is to monitor and evaluate adherence to the code. So there have been about 8 elections so far, local and national government general elections that we've been involved in. We have no power of sanction. We operate on moral suasion. So we're saying, here's the code. And in fact, these parties were party to looking at the code initially under Archbishop Harris. And
they helped to develop the code.
Exactly. And so they commented on the drafts.
Yes.
And so now for some of them to withdraw or say we are unethical, as has been said, so both parties giving us licks. At the end of the day, we feel we are unbiased citizens. No matter what you say, we are here to build a just society, an inclusive and a vibrant society. So the code has, it will be published in Catholic News on the 6th of April. The media, each election, publishes it free for us because we have no money. The only 2 organizations that gave us money was the Catholic Church and SDM, the Maha, Sabha. So we have very little money. And part of our role is to educate. We ran last election 2 programs for youths.
So that's what it's education of the population. And I guess the politicians also need to get part of that, right?
So the 4 goals, important to know the 4 goals. So we're here to foster democracy, free and fair election, no intimidation, no bribery. And we're here also to promote respect for human rights and encouraging participation in the electoral process. People shouldn't be intimidated not to go out to vote or not to vote if they think you're going to vote for another party. And finally, the 4th goal is to promote an election process free from violence, because as I told you in the past, there used to be violence. So there are 5 areas to the code. There is a preamble talking about our constitution, and then there's the commitment and the media, the role of the media, the campaign itself, and the council, how the council should operate. So it's on our website, and people can access the website. Or write in www.politicalethicstt.org, or just write to me.
Search for it.
Yes, search for it. The Code of Ethical Political Conduct. So the idea is that we can pull ourselves out of the morass that we find ourselves
and help change the discourse, as you talked about before,
not only the discourse,
shifting the needle.
Yes, but getting people to understand that no matter what, their participation is important. So, for instance, the Catholic Church, the general manager now of Catholic Commission for Social Justice, Father Stephen Alexander, rightly quotes Pope Benedict XVI to say that the Church has cannot and must not take upon herself the political battle to bring about the most just society possible. She cannot and must not replace the state, but she can't sit on the sidelines in the face of injustice. And so this is where the lay faithful come in. This is where participation is a social justice principle, that we all have a role to participate and to change the culture, all of us, whether you're Catholic or not.
See, Leela have me waiting to come in.
Oh, sorry.
I have a problem with Leela.
I waited on you.
Let me just say this. Politicians are A-class and preying on people's fears. And in Trinidad, it's preying on people's fears and paranoia. So I want to say no political party should say, as I've seen in the Express and the Guardian, where they're not taking on the council for... I think you are being unethical when you adopt that stance. It is wrong. I will also want to say it comes across to me as godless, because the issue of divine purpose and divine accountability, we are in the field of theology. We understand that. We try to promote that. So I think that is one. I think it's a great idea how it was formed. There was an evolution in the whole process. I remember Archbishop You know, you're the Pope, Benedict, that you mentioned just now. He said part of the problem with conflict in a society is that religious groups don't understand when it's time to witness and when it's time to only have dialogue. Benedict said that. I felt it was such a tremendous statement. So I believe we have to keep before people's minds the issue of what's it best for our society and how much am I willing to contribute to being the best.
I want to say, you know, I see politicians quibbling about the code in Trinidad. In St. Vincent, where I was bishop for a number of years, from the time the election is called, there is a sum of money that the government issues for the group. It's the Christian Council of Churches that does monitoring of the elections. So
of the campaign.
Of the whole campaign process. So it is statutory.
Right.
So the election is called, that sum of money is given over to this group. They hire monitors who go to the community meetings and listen and report on, and then complaints are brought back. So it's not just volunteer like how we have it here in Trinidad. So if a politician wants a mature democracy and does not want to take on the code, I would ask them, if you cannot deal with a code while you're going into an election, what are you going to do afterwards?
Right.
What are you going to do afterwards?
Mayhem.
If you don't know about ethical standards on the way in, you're not going to know about it when you've already been elected. So I want to say that politicians who are pushing back on the code are very short-sighted. And I would say misinformed by their people on this topic and should reconsider what they're actually saying. Because what type of society do you want us to become? If there is no code of ethical conduct that governs us as a society, then the mayhem that you are asking for, we will receive. And I think that this has to be reconsidered. We need a mature democracy, and we need our leaders to make decisions to get us there.
But why the pushback? Why the pushback on the code? Because,
of course, we, as I said, we have no power of sanction, so we name and shame. So if you say something terrible, or you character assassination, or you bribing people, and the council people, we haven't got enough resources. So we expect the public, and I invite the public to write to the council. If you see anything or you hear anything on social media or on the platforms, etc., report to us. And this applies, the code applies whether or not parties have signed on to the code. It applies to everybody, the leaders, the candidates, the supporters. It applies to everybody.
In the last election, one of the political leaders, the code took issue with what that person said on a public platform. That person turned around and lambasted the group. But the journalists and other leaders in society stood up with the council and said, no. We have reviewed what their judgment is, and we do find a problem with what you have said.
And there were editorials in all 3 national newspapers supporting the council.
Civil society understands that we need a code of ethics. But we haven't with you.
And Ralph is on the council
We
too.
keep it quiet. Over to you.
One of the things that we have to look at, and His Grace mentioned that as well, if, as a leader, you tell the population that I'm not following the code, it sends a signal to your followers. It sends a signal to the younger generation that it is okay not to follow rules, not to abide by the things that we're supposed to abide by. And this is one of the things that create the problems now, because it is okay not to follow what you say or do what you says, because I want to do it this way.
Right. And if, for example, a particular politician or gets into power and becomes a minister of whatever, it begs the question, how will they govern running a particular ministry? Because there are obviously rules and regulations that they have to follow in power.
Yes.
Because can I just say, ethics is about guiding principles that are based on morality. What is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. This ethical code of conduct is about ethics.
But you know, every religion and culture has the golden rule.
Yes.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Every culture, every religious script has that. Embedded in us is a moral framework. Embedded in all of us. That's being put inside of there. And there's no society that says, you know what, our ethical code is we're going to do what we want, when we want, how we want, or whoever we want. That never happens. The ethical code always holds us to the highest common factor.
I want to put this spoon in the pot, and that is, we've got to begin to wrap our minds around the issue of politics in this country has now become bribe infested. So that I am accountable to my briber or my bribologist, but not to the council. So we are accountable, to the wrong people who wish to own us. So that has to be called out. I am saying that as, it's amazing how much people are telling in the last 2 weeks who get bribed to switch. It's a serious thing. So that our accountability is to the wrong people, and not to the... And I feel we are throwing ethics out the window, in this society. Generally. How we drive, how we overtake. I believe we're throwing, how we treat the person from the other race, the other religion. I have a sermon called Defending the Other Side, where I talk at length about the Good Samaritan, how I treat the Hindu brother, We had a meet with Mr. Maraj, offshoot Adventist group Tuesday, who disrespected the Hindu religion in a funeral and the flags and what have you there. And we went, my boss and I, we went and had dialogue with Mr. Maraj on it. And it was quite effective. And we agreed to cooperate on issues.
All right, so we're running out of time. So we need to wrap up. So we'll start with your Grace. Final words in this election campaign going on to April 28th. What would you like the population to remember as they go through this next month?
What do you want on the 29th of April? Ask yourself that question.
Amen.
What do you want on the 29th? And that's what we have to start expecting between now and the 28th. If we want a just and fair society, the whole run-up to it has to be just and fair.
Leela?
I just want to remind citizens that the foundation of any society is about respecting the dignity, human dignity, which is God-given.
Normal.
And we all have to respect that and promote that.
Mr. Peter?
Yes, I would say that we need to go out there and do what we think is in the best interest of all of us and make the choice that we feel would take us into the future where we would want to be.
And Pastor Dottin?
Bertha von Suttner said, after the verb to love, the verb to help is the most beautiful verb in the world. I close.
Lovely to have those parting words from you and all on our platform today. So thank you very much for joining us, Your Grace, Leela, Mr. Peter, and Pastor Dottin.
Let's do it again.
As we look forward to the campaign and, of course, Election Day on the 28th of April. We thank you for viewing, and we continue to urge you to do the right and responsible thing, and let's help build our lovely country of Trinidad and Tobago.
Hallelujah.
Thank you for viewing.